We were just talking about Joey's Winchester Model 70 chambered in 270 WSM a couple of weeks ago. And I got a question on 6.8 Western. And many of you are familiar with this. They just took 270 WSM and put a faster twist rate in the barrel, basically, so it could shoot heavier bullets, higher BCs. And that's all the rage these days with cartridges, high BCs and fast twist rates. Well, I got a question, our thoughts on the 6.8 Western, but I thought this would be a good time to talk about just ballistic coefficient in general and ballistic coefficient versus velocity for hunting. And it's all a numbers game.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, we can go all day just, with numbers on this stuff.
We can go back and forth with it as far as you want to go.
Right. So, and there's no definitive answer to any of this. So there's no, this is what you need to do. Because of that, I thought we would just have a conversation today, just sharing some of our thoughts on ballistic coefficient versus velocity for hunting. So Joey, you've got a 270 WSM. What's your thoughts on hitting the 6.8 Western? Let's start there.
I think the 6.8 Western has a niche. I mean, the shoulder's angled on it a little more, so you can get a larger BC projectile in there, and you
a longer bullet.
Yeah, and the longer bullet is you can get more weight. So in certain hunting applications, I think that's probably gonna help you, like elk or bear or anything on that standard. Anytime you can add more mass, I think it's a benefit.
And I agree with him. I'm same thoughts. It's a niche cartridge, the 6.8 Western, for elk. That's the only advantage, or something bigger. That's the only advantage over the 270 WSM is you can put a heavier bullet in it.
Or other cartridges. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be the 270 WSM. They're just the closest match together. So you can compare one to the other. But you can get that bullet for that 270 WSM, but it's you don't have the right twist rate in the barrel to stabilize that BC or that higher weight bullet. So
we've got two things going on here. Okay, that's why I say this is all complicated numbers game. But okay, we've got sectional density, and sectional density is just basically forgetting bullet construction, even though you can't, because that's important.
It is.
Sectional density just gives you an idea of the penetration you're going to get. All right, the heavier a bullet is, the longer it is. Do you have a pencil somewhere close by?
I have a pen right here.
Here we go. Okay, perfect example. If this pen was really short, that's all we've got, it's right there. There's not much mass behind this point. All right, if you take the whole length of it, now you've got a lot of mass behind the point that when it hits, all that mass is going to give you better penetration. It's going to penetrate deeper.
It's going to propel it further into whatever it's hitting.
Right, the momentum of all that mass going in that direction. Okay, sectional density. When you get into heavier bullets, you get into a better sectional density as far as penetration. So traditionally, for hunters, when we want to shoot bigger game, we want to use heavier bullets for better penetration. So for elk hunting with a standard 270, and traditionally most people have opted for 150 or 160 grain bullet.
That's right.
For the better penetration. Okay, then there's the ballistic coefficient. That's a new thing.
It's a new thing to a certain extent.
It's a new thing for hunters.
That's right.
It's been around
forever for target shooters.
Right. This is my Remington 5R, chambered in 308 Winchester, Gen 1. This is my target rifle. And the twist rate on this barrel is 1 in 11.75, because the military determined at some point that that was the optimal twist rate for a 175 grain Sierra Match King bullet. Okay, so this is whereas a standard 308 used to be 1 in 12 rated twist, now it tends to be 1 in 10. This is 1 in 11.75.
And your standard 308s, you can get by with like 168 grain match, whereas, you know,
you're pushing it with the 175s.
Yes,
standard 1 in 12 twist. Some will do it, some not as well.
It's hit and miss.
It's hit and miss. Okay, just that little bit of extra twist is just perfect for 175. Okay, so this is nothing new for target shooters.
That's right.
Okay, but for hunters, long range hunting, extreme long range. Let's.
Yeah, extreme long range. Me and Tom both agree. For us on a hunting aspect, I would never probably try to take game over 400 yards, and 400 yards is pushing it for me. Even though we both shot guns for a long, many years.
We can sit there and hit targets all day at 500.
Yes, but, you know, for us, we don't want to take a chance of wounding game or anything like that, you know, so I set my cap there, and I'll be honest with you, I've never shot at any animal at 400 yards.
I haven't either,
but that would be my max that I would even try, and that animal would have to be broadside, standing still, where I could range that animal.
It'd have to be ideal, perfect condition.
Situation.
I'm in agreement with him 100% on that. That's my max as well. Ethical hunting range.
But we know there's a lot of talk and stuff out there now, and there's a lot of people taking animals at extreme long range. We're talking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1,000 yards. You know, even past that. I mean, all you have to do is look, you'll find it.
There's a video somewhere on somebody shooting something out there.
At 1,200 yards, 1,300 yards. It's just, we've talked, and there's too much error in that once you get out to that point.
Too much potential for
yeah, and me and him talked, you know, all it takes is a wind shift way out there, or an animal just to turn its head in that flight time of the bullet, and it moves the vitals to where they're in a different spot than you thought they were when you pulled the trigger.
Or can you even tell exactly where the vitals are at 1,000 yards?
And
just a slightly quartering animal at that distance, you're not really sure. But that's just our thinking. Everybody's got their own thoughts.
And I'm not knocking anybody that's doing anything. We're just giving you our opinions on what we think, and for us, what we would do at a hunting situation. That's why, for me, the BC bullets, the higher BC bullets, they don't really come into an equation for me, you know, because I'm not going to shoot out past 400 yards. And I think once you get out to that 400 yards is where they start to shine. So most of my rifles are geared towards 400 yards and in.
Right. And this is getting into the velocity. Okay, traditionally for us hunters, but before the invention of the laser rangefinder, let's start there. All right, because that's the only really technology that's changed this whole equation. For hunters, we always relied on fast. All right, so that's the velocity part of ballistic coefficient versus velocity in this. And
we always relied on fast for longer ranges, not necessarily short distance.
Right. It was to get that flat trajectory.
Matter of fact, at short distance, we relied on slower speeds.
We
toned it down.
This is how much this has all changed. For hunting, you went to a heavier bullet to slow it down, so that for closer ranges, so you didn't do as much damage. You didn't go to a heavier bullet for longer ranges. You went to the lighter bullet for longer ranges. All right. So now, back then, we didn't have laser rangefinders, so we wanted the flattest trajectory we could get
possible.
That's where your maximum point blank range came in. And then if you look at so many of the fast cartridges, the 270 Winchester, and then get into the all your old fast Magnums.
And your 25-06s, we talked about that the other week.
250, your Weatherby Magnums.
Yes, and you know, your nozzler cartridges now, they're made for speed. That's what they were designed for. They necessarily wasn't designed for the higher BC bullets. They were designed for speed.
Right, they're drag racers.
I mean, they're getting there as quick as possible. Okay,
well, velocity gives you a longer maximum point blank range. That's why 30-30 Winchester. It's shooting the same bullet as a 300 Winchester Magnum. Joey can load all that up right here in his press with the same bullet, same 30 caliber bullet. He can put it in a 30-30, a 308, a 30-06, a 300 Win Mag, a 300 Weatherby Mag. Right. The reason you go to the Magnums is to get that extra case capacity, to get that extra velocity. And what that gives you is faster velocity downrange.
And a longer maximum point blank range.
Flatter trajectory. Okay, so sub-millimeter Remington Magnum, 140 grain bullets, you got a maximum point blank range with an 8-inch diameter of, I believe, 360 some odd yards. We'll just call it 370. All right, that's a lot flatter shooting, and what that does is it takes out the error as far as if you're shooting an animal, a deer, at 320 yards.
It takes out the guesswork if you didn't have a laser rangefinder.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just point blank what it does. You know, once you pick the rifle up, I can shoot that animal from here to there. But you got to know your terrain. You got to know your distances out there. You know, all that stuff comes into an equation then for what you're doing for your hunting application.
And if we compare that to a sub-millimeter 08, same bullet as the sub-mag, just a slower velocity. It's not going to have as long of a maximum point blank range. So you're probably around 320 yards or so with 140 grain, with the exact same 140 grain bullet as the sub-mag.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now you can't shoot as far without knowing the range as the sub-mag.
And it's just knowing what your limitations are per cartridge, you know, and that way you can make a good hunting harvest, you know, shooting that animal.
Okay, well, once you get past a cartridge's maximum point blank range, now you're making elevation changes on your scope.
And that's where people's got into with the larger BC bullets and stuff like that. But you, at that point, you still got to have a laser rangefinder at that point.
Yeah, at that point, if you're making elevation adjustments, you're past the maximum point blank range. If you don't have a laser rangefinder, it doesn't work.
It's guesswork.
Yeah, you're not hunting at that point. You're just throwing lead out there. Stuff.
You're hoping for the best at that point, and that's not what you typically do in hunting.
That's not ethical hunting, just throwing lead out there.
You know, when we came up, it was know how far you're shooting, know what you're capable of. You know, my dad was in the military, you know, make sure you know how far you can shoot something. You know, don't take chances. You know, you gotta know what you can do. And that's why if people want to shoot extreme long ranges, that's fine. If you know you can do it and you've practiced at that, and you know, I'm not going to try to steer you against something that I wouldn't do. If that's what you're capable of doing, I think, you know, okay, you can do that. It's just not what we would do, and that's fine.
Okay, and even at the 400 yards, our max, we're still using maximum point blank range. That's why Joey has a 270 WSM, so that he can still reach out there 400 yards because he's got the velocity with that 270 WSM.
And I would know where I would be taking it hunting. I would know that I would have that shot available at 400 yards.
And you would know where 400 yards
exactly was. And I would know that land and terrain to know where my stopping point was at. And if I was going somewhere else and I could only see 100 yards, naturally, that rifle wouldn't be my first choice. You know, I would go for something else, you know, because at that point, I don't need that rifle with that maximum point blank range at that distance.
And because we're after velocity for increasing maximum point blank range, we want lighter bullets. And that's why the hunters have traditionally gone with the lighter bullets, the 270 Winchester, 130 grain bullet. That's always been the most popular because it's the fastest.
It's like the bullets I bought for the 270 WSM, they're 130 grain. I probably will try 140s. But you go buy those same bullets in a 6.8 Westerner, they come 160 and up. And that's the difference.
And they're running a lot slower.
And so
with those heavier bullets, you're having to adjust for elevation sooner. You don't have as much range as far as your maximum point blank range. Those heavier bullets are dropping off quicker because they never had the initial velocity that the lighter bullets did. So that was traditional hunting. And that's why when we went to the heavier bullet in traditional hunting, it was to slow the bullet down for shooting in the woods.
It was, and not to tear up as much meat because we were trying to harvest for the freezer.
Right.
So it's just flip-flop now. So
all right, now with the high BCs, ballistic coefficient, that being a thing and people wanting to shoot further, with the laser rangefinders. Okay, if you know the exact distance, you can adjust for elevation, and then you can compensate for bullet drop and raise the rifle up enough, and the bullet's going to drop in there.
That's right, and providing you have time to make the correct calculations and adjustments. Providing
you have time to laser rangefind the animal, make the adjustment calculations, get on the rifle, or if you've got a scope that's got all that built in, because there's some of those out there now.
They are. And I would say with that, you're wanting to be in an area that is conducive for that type of hunting. In other words, wide open spaces, you know,
right.
Small wood lots, more or less just open land where you can see those longer distances. You're going to be on a spotting scope at that point. You're going to be looking for something across 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 yards. You're not going to see that with a naked eye.
Right. And
you're going to have to pick that up in a spotting scope or binoculars. And
then try to close the distance to get to within shooting range, unless you're one of them that think that it's okay to shoot at 1,200 yards, but you're probably going to try to get a lot closer than that.
Or within what you know you're capable of.
Right. All right, so that's your spot and stalk. Really popular out west. Not so much here in the east. We got too much vegetation.
Yeah, I mean, for us here, I mean, 400 yards, you're seeing a long ways. I mean, for us here. I mean, we have very few places where we see much longer than that. I mean, we have a few fields and a few power lines and a few cutovers, but...
We have a few places we can see 1,000 yards, but it's not many.
And it's rare, and it's usually in a small area, and something gets across you. It's not like it's just standing out there feeding. There's not many of those places.
Right. We don't have the open areas for that. And we know with the places we hunt, we're almost certainly not going to have time to make all those adjustments on an animal.
And for us, I mean, that's why I say you got to pick a rifle for your type of hunting.
Right.
You know, for us here, the 6.8 Westerner doesn't hold any advantage over 270 WSM for where we're at.
And we're not elk hunting.
Yes, and for other places it might. You know what I'm saying? You know, if you got the country to stretch the legs on the 6.8 Westerner out to 600 yards, 700 yards, there's a benefit to that. But just for us, there's not much benefit for it here.
And most of you know, but for those of you who don't, that all ballistic coefficient is the aerodynamics of the bullet.
That's right.
And every bullet, when it leaves the barrel, it's automatically starting to slow down due to it not being perfectly aerodynamic. There's drag on it.
There's drag on every bullet, and there's gravity on every bullet. They're both dropping to the earth at the same speed. you know, so every bullet starts out with the same limitations, I guess you would say.
Right. So you got your initial velocity. What more aerodynamics do is it doesn't slow down as fast. So
at distance.
You take a heavy bullet that starts out slower than a light bullet, but it's got a heavier BC. At some theoretical point way out there, that heavy bullet's actually going to be traveling faster.
It will take over. It'll overtake the other bullet.
The other one, the light bullet's slowing down quicker. So eventually the heavier one will be going faster, but you got to get way out there for that to even matter.
I mean, you won't start seeing that till out past 600, 700. And the further you go out, the more evident it will be far as seeing it. But at close distance, you'll never know.
Right. Ballistic coefficient's not even a consideration within 300 yards, and you're barely seeing it at 400. And keep in mind, a lot of this is, all right, and it's funny how we think. Now, we think in such absolute terms. Okay, because bullet A has a better ballistic coefficient than bullet B, that doesn't mean bullet B still doesn't work. It's just this one's slightly better. All right, it's not the end all be all. And when I said that none of this is nothing new, 1906, the U.S. Army went to 150 grain Spitzer tip and the 30-03 cartridge. Changed the name to the 30-06 because they did that in 1906. They went from a 220 grain round nose, which was not aerodynamic in the least.
Not at all.
To 150 grain Spitzer tip pointed bullet because it was more aerodynamic and a lot faster, the velocity part. So, I mean, this has been around forever.
And know your equipment. That's one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you. He knows I ran into a situation a while back with a 280 Remington. It was a Winchester Model 70 Super Grade that I had. And me and him know about what velocity we were supposed to be getting out of this rifle, but when we took it to the range, we never could get it. No matter what we did.
He's chronographing it.
I'm shooting it through a chronograph. I'm trying different loads. I'm even downsizing the bullet that I want to shoot in this rifle to try to get velocity, and I never could get it. It's just that particular rifle didn't produce the velocity. So at that point, that particular rifle's point blank range is pulled back a good bit because I am not getting the velocity that I should have been getting out of that 280.
And, okay, now this is getting into something interesting here. Okay, so much of what's out there now is the marketing. I mean, absolutely, it's to sell you something. Okay, and what I said before about this is nothing new for target shooters and so forth. Well, target shooters have always reloaded. Serious target shooters are shooting hand loads. They're not looking on the box from the factory to see what their velocity is.
And that's what I was fixing to say next. Do not trust the box. I mean, that is when they put that on that box, I'm sure they have a plus or minus, you know.
A big one.
And your rifle may react different with that factory ammunition than Tom's rifle or my rifle.
Right. So most of this is aimed at those of you that don't really know the bullets. You don't really know your rifle. You've never chronographed it. And again, we're talking long range here. Okay, back to the speed. Speed eliminates potential for errors. All right. Well, if you're really reaching out there, there's no room for error. Speed gives you some room for error.
It does.
And if your velocity's off, because that box, the bullets that you bought for your 6.5 Creedmoor or your 6.8 Western, because it said your velocity should be this, it don't mean it's that or even close.
And it's probably based out of their test rifle. You don't know if their test rifle was the same twist rate is yours. You don't know if their test rifle is the same barrel length as yours. You don't know if their test rifle is the same barrel profile as yours. All that stuff factors into that equation. So one of my best advice I can give you is if you don't have a chronograph available, do like I did years ago. Take your rifle out, find somewhere where somebody or a range or somebody that has some land will let you shoot it at 300 yards. Know how far your bullet drops. You can take a tape measure, you can measure, and you know then in your mind, I know what my gun's doing at 300 yards.
And the chronograph's just to give us a starting point. We still have to go out there and shoot the distances to know for absolute certain. And the scopes now that you can get calibrated where you dial the yardage. All right, you can't send them the information for your calibration on that for the dials and stuff. You can't send them the information based on the information you got off the box and expect that to work.
Yeah, it may get you on paper.
Yeah, but we're talking hunting and making precise shots.
Yeah, you know, we want to hit the vitals on the animal.
Yeah.
So all we're trying to do is keep you from any heartache down the road and prepare you for what hunting situation you may find yourself in. And this is just a conversation to help get everybody to that point or just give you some information.
Right, and like we said to start with, there's 100 different ways we can approach this, and it's all a numbers game. And me personally, back to the numbers game, I hate playing numbers games. The 6.8 Western, I absolutely see no purpose in that cartridge whatsoever because it's trying to stretch out a 270 to make it do something it was never designed to do. Okay, so they're changing the design, increasing the twist rate to shoot heavier bullets. Why not just go get a 7mm Magnum?
Or a 300 Win Mag.
Yeah, at the 7mm Mag, and the point of the 6.8 Westerns to shoot the heavier bullets. If you want heavier bullets, go get a 7 Mag. Okay, if that ain't enough, well, go get a 300 Mag. If you get to the point you shoot a 338 Lapoa, you probably went too far.
You may need to pull the range back a little bit.
Right. And then also something else, all this with the heavier bullets. And the reason I say that the 270 wasn't designed for that. You get into so many other things when you start going down that road of, I want heavier bullets. Okay, well, what about your throat depth on your rifle? That's important.
Or your magazine length.
Your magazine length. This rifle here, it's a short action for the 308. My custom loads that I have for this rifle will not fit into this magazine. I shoot this rifle single shot, one bullet at a time.
And for our target rifles, that's okay, because we're punching paper with them.
Exactly. And me personally, there's so much, short actions are the rage these days. I prefer a long action even for my short action cartridges because then I can load my bullets to where I want to and still get them in the magazine. It gives me that flexibility there.
And I think that would be typically what needs to happen because technically the 6.8 Westerner is a short action. The Creedmoor, short action. If you're going to go to those longer BC bullets, you're going to have them sticking out. That's the reason they make that shoulder go back a little bit. But still, I think it would be more beneficial to put that in a long action so that you can get that bullet out as far as you need to if your throat depth will accept it.
Right. And for the target shooters, well, they don't really care.
Well, we hope this answers some of your questions. Just know where you're hunting and what works for you, where the velocity works better for you in your hunting ranges or the BC. You'll know that according on where you're hunting at. And we hope it helped you and you got some knowledge out of this that's beneficial. That was our goal.
And this all comes back to what it's always been, is bullet selection.
Yeah, and like we said in the beginning, it's just a numbers game, but the numbers need to work out in your favor for where you're hunting.
Right.
And that's our main goal.
All right. Hope this helps. If you got any questions on it, just leave them below in the comments section. And God bless, and y'all have a good day.